You're listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm Mark Ballo, and I'm here with my co-host Tom Coyne.
Yes, sir.
So today we have a special guest, Jamie Cramer. Jamie is the original guitarist with the Christian hard rock band Holy Soldier. Jamie formed the band along with bassist Andy Robbins in 1985. They eventually recorded two albums with Jamie on guitar, that being 1990's self-titled album, Holy Soldier, and 1992's Last Train. Jamie left the band after that, but we're going to talk to Jamie about, the formation of the band in 1985, go up through those first two albums, touch a little bit on that third album, even though he didn't play on it. And, we're going to get an update on what he's doing today. And so let's get right to this interview with Jamie Cramer from Holy Soldier. Jamie, welcome to the Jersey Guys Podcast. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate it. I'll start, and I know Tom's got a bunch of stuff to go on the two albums that you played on and the history of the band. But I just wanted to kind of talk about, if you could talk about the early days of Holy Soldier, when the band formed, 1985, I guess it was, and just, that whole initial period of the band.
Yeah, for sure. So 1985-ish, Robbie Wolf, he goes by now. Him and I went to high school together, and then we kind of parted ways for a couple of years, and then we kind of reconnected, and he introduced me to Andy, and we started jamming together, and we decided to kind of put something together, and we got a couple other guys, Pete Kearney, drummer, and then Larry Farkas, who was in Vengeance. Was the original other guitar player, and we started rehearsing in a place in Long Beach, California, and just kind of writing and practicing, and we started clubbing, and I think one of our first dates was like the Brent Event Center in Brea, and I can't remember who we'd played with, but it's a small theater. It was really fun, and being a kid from Orange County, California, Huntington Beach area, I had played a lot of backyard party bands, and it was actually pretty prolific in the early mid 80s because, somebody gets a bunch of kegs and charges a couple bucks at the door, and they have a band, and you just fill a backyard with 200 people. And we got pretty popular. And so after doing that for a while, I just kind of burned out on that whole scene, and it just was going nowhere. And so Holy Soldier was my first introduction to actually playing LA clubs when we started doing that. I had not played LA clubs. So yeah, we started jamming, and we went through a couple of incarnations of members. Larry left. We got Michael Cutting joined the band, and then we were at the Waters Club in San Pedro, California, and saw a band, and I can't remember Terry's little band's name at the moment, but we saw Terry. And he had this big double kick set, and he was doing a drum solo with wiffle ball bats, and we're like, we're stealing that guy. So we stole him, and that was the original lineup of Holy Soldier. And then we started clubbing in Hollywood in the heyday, and back then it was a pay to play scenario. So how that worked was promoters you wanted to play, they would sell you X amount of pre-sale tickets, and you had to pay them. You had to buy the tickets, and it was up to you to sell them. If you didn't sell them, you ate it, right? So we had a pretty good support group that would go around, and we were passing out flyers on the Sunset Strip, and we were able to get through the tickets pretty quickly, and it wasn't very long before we were going back to promoters to buy more tickets, and they're like, you what? And next thing you know, after a period of time of doing that, we didn't have to buy tickets anymore because we were a guaranteed draw. And then pretty quickly after that, we started headlining the shows, and then it just kind of snowballed. It was a lot of fun. We were all clubbing at the same time with Guns N' Roses and Warrant, and Bang Tango and, all those bands from those days, we were all doing the same thing together. And, back then you didn't have social media.
Yeah.
So you had to hand somebody a piece of paper with your
Oh,
face
yeah.
on it saying you're playing, right? So
Yeah.
there
Well,
was
that
a
was a huge
lot.
thing. Yeah. With the LA, all the bands on Sunset Strip, right? The flyering everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, any given Friday, Saturday, from the Whiskey A Go Go to Gazzarri's was just shoulder to shoulder people just mingling around, walking. So it was a really good vehicle to get out there and get your name out there. And then it just kind of took off. We started selling out. I think we had some records at Gazzarri's as far as breaking attendance records, and it just kind of took off on its own. And then so that was a really good time. And when you're in it, you don't realize you're in a period of time that's going to be looked back upon, as a decade of, musical, history or something. You don't realize it because you're just in it and you're doing it and you're having fun. But yeah, it was really fun. And we kind of progressed pretty quickly. And then we had a hiccup. Robbie left the band and we went on a national search for a singer. So, funny story. Janie Lane from Warrant was in a band called Plain Jane in LA. So he was playing at the Troubadour and we had a mutual friend and we were looking for a singer and he was looking to do something else. So I went down and watched him at the Troubadour. And so him and I talked and he agreed to come by our studio, and kind of check it out. So he comes by and we ripped through a set. And we had a warehouse in Gardena, California, so we had the full stage with the ramps and the whole thing set up. And he came out, and he was really cool. It was just, it wasn't what he wanted to do. Because if you listen to our music, I mean, I know we get labeled as a glam LA band. We weren't. Our music was not glam.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and I know we get labeled like that a lot. But Janie clearly wanted to take a different direction. Like, he was kind of wanting to do the Poison type thing, and in fact their shows in the clubs in LA were very, very much like what Poison was doing with the girls on the stage and everything. So it wasn't really what he wanted to do, and I understood, and it was cool. And then Warrant was looking for a singer at the time, and so he hooked up with those guys, and we all know what happened after that.
Yeah.
So again, here we are looking for a singer. Janie didn't work out; it wasn't going to work. So we're auditioning, and I can tell you right now that's one of the most painful things you can go through is trying to audition and find a singer. And I mean, some bands maybe get really lucky finding the right guy, but it was tough. I mean, most of the bands in Hollywood in the day, they had their lineups all set up. So yeah, it was super interesting. And then somebody'd show up wearing a wig but had a good voice, and you're like, I don't think it's gonna work. And
Yeah.
because really at the end of the day, it's more than just having a voice. You have to connect with the other guys, right?
Sure.
It's like any relationship. So, you got to kind of feel it. And then, back then image was very important. So that was a piece of it. And you just got to kind of bring it. And it was really tough. So long story short, we get this demo tape from Memphis, Tennessee, and it was Steven, who had recorded a few songs with his brother Sean, and so we played it, and it was very different. And his voice was just kind of unique. It wasn't the typical LA sound, and so we thought, well, this might be something cool. So we flew him out, and we kind of hung out for a few days and jammed, and he kind of shared some of his ideas, and we decided to give it a shot. So he drove out. Like I said, we had a warehouse that had like an apartment built into it. So he lived there with a few of us, and we just started working on the stuff. So that little hiatus we had in the Hollywood clubs at the time, looking for a singer, was over, and we started hitting the clubs again with the new singer and the new reincarnation. So, and then we just picked up where we left off. We're selling out everywhere and got a lot of record company attention. So we had done a couple demos. Our manager, Darren Hinton, at the time, got us in the studio, and we recorded, I think, 3 songs. And it's kind of funny now because when you look back on that kind of stuff, it's a little painful, but well, some people like it, and it's,
well, I mean, Tom and I were just talking about this before we went on. I just actually came across that you guys actually had two demos prior to the debut album coming out. The first one was with your original singer. It was a three track demo, right? And then yeah, I guess you did another one a couple years later, and that I guess had Steven was in the fold at that point.
Yes, yes. And then we did I think, I don't remember how many songs we did with him. And it's really funny too, because I think some of that didn't even make the first record. So I think we took pieces of those songs and kind of hacked them up. And as a band, we always wrote, the collaboration piece is what made Holy Soldier sound like it did, right? So, you know, if I bring like the intro hook for See No Evil, you know, that was something I wrote, and it was another song at one point. And so we took that, and then the turnaround, we kind of added a different turnaround to it, and then kind of built the verse, and you know, that intro riff was the wanted to be in the chorus. And so I've never been the type of songwriter that just, you know, I put something together and this is it. You know, my ego's not that big to where I think I'm such an amazing songwriter. I think I'm a good songwriter when I work with other people. And I collaborate, and I'm very honest with myself about that. But Holy Soldier was about that. There was no egos. We all worked together. Nobody was trying to shine over anybody else, and we kind of kept everybody and each other in check, and that's why it worked so well. But yeah, so some of those demo songs, and I'm trying to remember which ones and which parts of those demo songs wound up being some of the hooks on the record, but we just kind of attacked it in pre-production as just, we're gonna just grind through this, and we're gonna make the magic happen. And that's kind of what happened. And we did the second album the exact same way. We just we came in, we stayed at David Zaffiro's place in Seattle when he was up there at the time on the second record, and we just locked ourselves in a room for 10 hours a day and drank coffee and just crushed the ideas all day and hammered it out. And then, you know, you record it on a 4-track, and then the next day you listen to it and you're like, nah, I hate this part. And it was just it's just the process. And that's pretty much how we attacked it. And it worked, I think, for what we were doing.
Jamie, I wanted to talk about David Zaffiro a little bit. How did you guys get hooked up with him?
So when we signed with A&M Records, we finally hammered out our deal with A&M, and then Myrrh Records was the Christian distribution part of that. And so Mark Maxwell at Myrrh hooked us up and suggested David. So we had heard his solo record, and we listened to it, and we just really thought he had a really interesting take on melody and song structure. Dave's very melodic. So we met with him. And, you know, he went over our demo, and Dave's very much a perfectionist. And so he liked what we were doing, but I think he could see past that to see what it could be. And so I think that's why it worked. And we just decided, I think this is a good fit. And to this day, you know, we always called him the sixth member of the band.
Now, when you were describing your days back in the LA club scene, were you guys already known as Holy Soldier, or were you going by a different name?
No, yeah, from day one, we were Holy Soldier. Yeah, we came up with the name, and you know, we had a couple other ideas in the name, and actually Robbie, our first singer, came up with it, and I wasn't super fond of the name at the time, and it kind of grew on me a little bit. But there was a couple other names we were kicking around. I think Raging Angels or something was another one. And but yeah, no, Holy Soldier, it stuck. And it was really interesting because in the LA club scene, I mean, we had a large secular draw because people, when they come see you live, they're not really listening to all the lyrics, and they like the sound, they like the music, they like the look, and it just, you know, they hear, maybe by the time we get a record out, they hear what you're about, and then, you know, it goes from there. But yeah, the lyrical piece was kind of a non-issue in the club days. But yeah, the name was from day one. Yeah.
So now you guys, you talked about the you know, obviously Holy Soldier is a Christian band. Then you have, you know, you guys were involved in the whole secular scene. Was there actually like any type of like a Christian music scene that you guys were part of, or was it just always kind of like you said, that secular thing where you just played with other bands and didn't have to necessarily be a Christian band?
So we were always a Christian band. I mean, there's other Christian bands that really approached it differently. That they'll throw Bibles from the stage and stuff. We just wanted to let the music kind of do it. And hey, you know what? There's a need for each thing. Like, you talk about like your body, you have a hand, you have a foot, they have two different purposes, but they're all part of the same thing. So, when you have a Christian band that's trying to get into the secular clubs or playing a secular club, and they want to have a break in the middle and have a sermon or an altar call, that's cool, but I'm going to say a lot of those bands are probably drawing more of a Christian audience.
Yeah.
And then, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
totally.
Well, so in other words, you guys were not really like as overt with it as say like a Petra, for instance, or a band like that.
Exactly. I mean, we were very strong in our faith, and I mean, we even had a Wednesday night Bible study that we did just for us, and kids would get word of it and want to come, and it got so big we had to give it to a church because we just could. And then we started recording and touring. We just couldn't do it anymore. So there was no compromise with us internally, but we just had a vision for what we wanted it to be. And at the end of the day, you're not going to change somebody's mind, right? You standing on a street corner telling somebody, that they're going to go to hell if they don't change their ways, you're going to turn them off.
Yeah.
So just by being an example and just, being loving and understanding, I think you draw more people. And so we just wanted to let the music do what it was supposed to do. And I'm going to tell you, it was very humbling when, I got off stage. We played Red Rocks in Denver and we opened for Petra. It was a sold out show. It was one of the biggest shows we've ever done. It was awesome. And I get off stage, and I was the guy that always wanted to towel off and go meet people because, again, a surfer kid from Huntington Beach, I was always humbled by people coming to see me play, right? So I wanted to go meet them. And this kid comes up and he was telling me he was going to commit suicide, and somebody gave him our record. And, he was in his room listening to the record, and the lyrics really spoke to him, and it turned his life around, So
Wow.
That wasn't me. That I can take zero credit for that. That was not me. I was the vehicle, and that's all I can say about it. But that's the vision we had, was the music was going to do it. And I spoke with somebody yesterday from Norway. They said they're not a believer, and they said your music speaks to me, and they take it a different way, like the pain inside of me.
Yeah.
And that song Lies. He said, I had an ex-girlfriend that is that song Lies, So everybody's going to interpret it their way, but at the end of the day, it's not me that can change somebody's heart, right? So we just wanted to approach it that way, and so yeah, we did a lot of secular gigs. We did some Christian concerts with other Christian bands, but that wasn't our vision. We didn't want to be limited to playing church gigs and Christian festivals. We decided that we wanted to get out, and it worked. I mean, we had ICM booking on that first tour. We were actually booked with YNT for the YNT tour, and then Dave Medichetti broke his arm or his leg or something, and had to cancel the tour, and that was crushing because we were looking forward to it. And then we hooked up with Extreme and Alice in Chains, and we played the Cat Club there in New York City with them, and that was supposed to be a whole tour, and then there were some date conflicts, so we wound up just doing the one show with those guys in New York. But so that was our vision.
Tom was a Cat Club guy.
Since I've been doing these podcasts for the last year, I always prided myself on how many great shows I saw at the Cat Club in New York City. And the more I interview people, the more I find out of bands that I love that I missed. And I never realized you guys played there.
Yeah. It was Alice in Chains, Extreme, and then we were the third on the bill. Yeah.
And that was on the first record or the second record?
That was on the first record.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was on the first record. Yeah, and there were supposed to be more dates together, and like I said, there was some scheduling conflicts, but it was kind of fun because when you're on tour, and the 3 tour buses were out in front, and well, you guys know New York, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe the driver got that bus around that town, and then so we're out in front of the club, and it's kind of fun because everybody wants to see each other's bus. So Gary Sharon was in our bus, and each bus is a little different, and hanging out with Nuno at sound check, and him and I were sitting at a table with our guitars and shooting the breeze. And back then you don't know, they weren't that big. We all just came out. Alice in Chains, Dirt, they just came out. In fact, their sound guy gave me their CD, and we were playing it in the bus. And we liked it so much, we started playing Man in the Box for sound check. So it was a really good time. It was a really really fun time in our career. And the second tour was a little bit different than that because we didn't have A&M, but it was also a fun tour. But when they book your tour, they have to book you with all your big shows where your airplay is heavy, and then you have to fill in the dates in between. So one day you might be playing Red Rocks, and the next day you're playing Bob's Bowling Alley.
Right.
Yeah.
So which is cool because you're playing, but.
Well, you mentioned Alice in Chains. That was at a period of time when we were kind of led to believe that grunge, before it was called grunge, could survive at the same time as traditional hard rock, metal. And it turned out that it didn't, unfortunately. But I remember when all those bands came out, like in 89 and 90, and people that were into metal like myself, we were very well receiving of it, not knowing that it was going to be like a phenomenon that, changed really what we loved the most to be exited out. But we could talk about that a little bit later. I did want to ask you a little bit about the Christian scene. There was always a stigma back in the day because I was like very into, I was into Striper from, when they first came out. So like that opened the gate to hundreds of Christians bands from me, from stuff like Degamo and Key all the way up to Recon and Neon Cross and everything in between. There was always a stigma of it at the time. Are these guys for real? We used to think that, some guys are really Christians. Some guys put it on to get a deal or to attract more fans. Was that something that was out there? And I'm not asking you to name, bands or artists, but was it a scene that did have bands that were really legit and some guys that kind of, might be a good way to sell records?
I'm going to be honest, I personally didn't see that. And I'm going to say, if you're going to try to label yourself as a Christian band to gain more career notoriety, you're fooling yourself. So
it's a bad strategy.
It is. It actually is. And people have told me that, if you guys weren't a Christian band, you would have been bigger. I disagree, because that wasn't the issue with us. The issue was, you just brought up a really good point. I think it was timing. Our first record came out in 90, and that was right when everything was turning, right?
It was right there.
It
was right there.
It was right. Yeah. That was the mark. Had our first record come out in like 1988,
right,
we would have been bigger and had more videos on MTV and the whole thing. And I'm a firm believer, at the end of the day, it happened the way it was supposed to. And I don't have any regrets. But there was some other things that kind of, and we can talk about that in a minute. But as far as the Christian band thing, I didn't see that personally, where guys were just putting on a show because they thought they were going to draw more or sell more records, because it's really counterintuitive. If you're going to do that, if you're going to do that, you need to kind of be committed to why you're playing music. And for me, like I had mentioned, in the party band I was in, I just saw people circling the drain. I mean, doing cocaine, and girls hanging out with the band that were, CPAs or secretaries and nice girls. And after about 3 or 4 months, they're not that anymore.
Right.
They're doing whatever they need to do to get cocaine. And I was actually disgusted with it all. I woke up one Saturday morning hungover, and I'm 19 years old, and I didn't know which way I was going, and I called Robbie. So my first singer that we went to high school together, I was mentioning, he quit the band we were in because he went to Calvary Chapel, and I didn't understand why you have to quit the band because you went to Calvary Chapel. So 2 years later, this day I'm talking about, on that Saturday morning, I called him, and it was his birthday, and he goes, man, I've been really praying for you. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm calling you, Rob, but I just thought I'd say hi. And he's like, hey, can I bring you somewhere? I want to take you somewhere. And he took me to this church that was all musicians. Steve Valdez was the pastor. He had long hair, and it was just a place of acceptance. And being raised Catholic, I'd never seen that. It was always about penance, and God had a big hammer, and you can never be good enough, and so that was the draw for me. And then I realized I can play my music and do my music for good and make a difference, and that's what motivated me to be in a Christian rock band. I think the strategy we did with not being, like, to your point, so overt at the shows, I think was a strategy, because, like, at the end of the day, if people like your music and buy your records, they're going to hear the lyrics, and they're going to be touched that way. But yeah, I think it's a bad strategy to to use that.
It was something that was out there, because I mean, I go back far enough to when there wasn't even a Christian hard rock or metal scene. And it was something I remember. There was always talk amongst people, like, are these guys on the up and up with this, And then you'd hear, like, somebody tell you a story and say, well, these guys definitely are, but, these guys aren't. And
well, I think people even accused, Stryper got accused of that, right? Is it an act, back in the day, So I think that was out there. Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you, Michael Sweet and I were watching a band one time in Orange County. We were hanging out, and I forgot what band we were there. Him and I were standing there, and we had Diet Cokes in our hand on ice, right? And this girl walks up, and she walks right up to Michael and puts her nose in his drink and sniffs his drink. And we looked at her, and she goes, I just wanted to see if you guys were for real.
Interesting.
So to your point, yes, but is it a sin to relax and have a beer? It's not.
No, absolutely not.
I'm probably going to hell if it is, but I'm just kidding. But anyway, that's the perception. That's the perception piece. So you actually have a responsibility if you're doing that, and you're going to carry that moniker, that you have to be responsible. I'm not gonna make some 15-year-old kid feel like I'm a hypocrite or I'm fake, right? So you have to be responsible with that when you're out and about. But does it mean you're fake? No. Were there bands that maybe were just riding the wave and we're not living the life? I'm sure that's possible. I didn't see it myself, but that's between them and God. But
well, when we wrap up and we go off the air, we'll talk for 5 minutes, and I'll tell you why I asked this question. But
okay,
I can't expound on it on the air. But I did.
But like I said perception, right? So they see us, they see the tight pants, and we're goofing off and having fun, backstage or at the bus or whatever. And so I mean, you don't look like an altar boy, right? You don't look like so people could easily think you're not what you say you are,
right? And I think that did probably have a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to kind of make a U-turn back to the music, and the first album. How did this album do for you guys? I know when it came out, it got a lot of buzz all over the place. Did it sell up to your expectations? Could you tell us a little bit about the whole experience of touring it and how the sales went on it?
Yeah, it did actually. I'm trying to remember what it shipped. I want to say we quickly got to the 25,000 mark, and I just remember walking into a Warehouse Records and seeing a cardboard display with our mugs on it, and I was like, holy moly, this is crazy. So it did really well. I think it exceeded a lot of expectations, and I don't have hard and fast numbers, but I want to say, if I remember correctly, and I wish Andy was here because he's the numbers guy, but I want to say it was a couple 100,000, 250,000, something like that.
Wow.
So, and that's total sales over, a long period of time. It wasn't like right out of the gate, but it did really well. It did really well. So we had a fair amount of airplay in some major cities. So, you go into, say, Corpus Christi, and we played a pretty bigger theater there. I want to say 5,000 seater. Pretty much filled it up, and then some cities you didn't get a lot of airplay, and then Japan it went over really well. So we did a tour over there. So it was it did better than I kind of expected for the first time out.
So what led to the breakup of A&M Records? Was it more like just the shifting of the musical climate?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So there was I want to say hostile takeover or corporate merger with Polygram. which we didn't know about when we were signing our deal, because we had taken several months. Our attorney worked really hard to get us 50% of our publishing on that first record, which is unheard of, because the three ways to be paid is mechanical, publishing, and songwriting. And the publishing is a big deal. So a record company might say, hey, Tom, I'm going to sign your band, but we want all your publishing for your first two records. You're like, yeah, all right, no problem. Well, you go platinum twice, and they own the publishing on that music.
Yeah, you have
and
nothing to show.
You just signed away truckloads of money, right? So the publishing is a big deal. So we got 50% with A&M on the first record with a second album option. So the second record was an option. So with that said, Steven had left the band prior to the tour for personal reasons. So we're playing the Palace in Hollywood, sold out. I think Love and Rockets was opening up for us. And this guy shows up backstage, and he was from A&M, but it wasn't our A&R guy. And he introduced himself. So we're like, what's going on? He's like, oh, well, your guy left the company, we just found out about the Polygram merger, and then the bomb drop. He goes, "Where's your singer, Steven?" Like, well, and that was when Eric Wayne, who sang on Promise Man, he did that first tour with us, and he did a fantastic job. Eric was great. So I think that was part of the driving force for them not to pick up the second record, because the guy that they signed that was on the album is not in the band anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about that, because that's the whole timeline. So actually, when the album came out, did you even do any shows with Steven for that album, or that was it?
So we did. Yeah, we did some shows. We did a Western United States tour with Steven, and all the LA dates. But when it came time to kick off the national tour, the world tour, he had left, and then that's when Eric got in there, and like I said, he killed it, and he was good every night live. So we were going to move forward and use Eric on the second record, and then word approached us, and Steven wanted to come back and do Last Train. So you want to use the singer you're known for, right? So we said okay, and Steven joined the band back up, and we started pre-production on Last Train. But the record company, the A&M deal, I think had a lot to do. And I could be speculating, but because I don't think it was ever said, but my very strong opinion is that's what drove that, is partially because Steve wasn't there, and it was the second record was an option, and there was a lot of turmoil going on with A&M at the time with the merger.
Kind of gave them an excuse to get rid of you. Sounded
exactly.
Like, yeah.
Which I've been asked before, why would they do that with such good out of the box numbers, and I don't have the answer to that.
Well, also, you're talking it's now close to 1992 probably at that point, and as much as we said earlier, 1990 was kind of like the kickoff point of the music climate changing. Not by 91, 92, it was even further, that way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the second album, the recording of it, the writing. It's a kind of a different album from the first one. I like both of them a lot. I don't rate it quite as high as the first album, but it's a very strong album. How did the writing process go with that? And if you could tell us a little bit about the making of the second record.
Sure. So you can kind of tell the guitar dynamic is a little bit different because Michael had left right before Last Train for personal reasons. And we got hooked up with Scott Soderstrom, and Scott and I connected really well because, as a two guitar player band, you got to get along with the other guitar player, right? He's got a little bit different style. Actually, his style always kind of reminded me a little Skid Row-ish, the way he writes and plays, and like Virtue and Vice, that's kind of his riff. And so Scott joins the band, and Steve's back, and we decided to head up to Seattle to Dave Zappiro's place to start pre-production. So the writing process was very similar to the first record, except for we didn't come to the table with, partial songs already written like we did on the first record. So we just started working, and, many hours a day, just throwing ideas out there, and then constructing ideas into songs, and then reworking those ideas. And, it was a complete collaboration effort. and it's really hard to explain. And when I always kind of explain it to people, that's when the magic happens. That's the best way I could put it, because there's no formula, really. It's just you start being inspired, and then somebody might play something that inspires you, and then that's like what I mentioned earlier. I'm not. There's no way I am that big-headed to think I can write these amazing entire songs by myself, because I think I bring good ideas, but when we bounce them off each other, it inspires the other guy to come up with something, and that's where the collaboration happens. So that's how Last Train was written, and then the recording process was very similar to the first record.
How did the sales go on this album? Was it, I'm guessing, lower than the predecessor?
It did well too. We won a Dove Award for the first record, and we definitely had some Dove Award nominations for the second album. And in fact, if I'm trying to remember correctly, because I have something on my wall that says we did, I think we got a Dove Award for Last Train as well. So you're right that the vibe of that record was very different from the first. I think the spirit of the band was captured in that record. But it was just a little bit different direction. You got, Virtue and Vice, and that's kind of a cool jam. And Last Train, I think is one of my favorite songs on that record, really. It's just got a cool vibe, and I dig the solo I did in that song, and it all just kind of grooved and felt really good. So it's a fun song to play live.
What for basically the two albums, the first two albums, you had David Zaffiro, who Tom mentioned earlier, from Bloodgood, the guitar player. What was it like for you as a guitar player, having your producer on those first two albums be a guitar player himself?
Fantastic question. So David is a very, very accomplished guitar player and songwriter, and he's very good with melody. So there's some level of pressure. I mean, we were very good friends. We're still very good friends to this day. In fact, I got to see him last weekend when he was in town. But you're sitting in a control room with a big mixing board in front of you, across from your producer, with your guitar. And, all my solos were written ahead of time. I'd work them all up, so I'm ready to go when I get in the studio. And David was very gracious, but he's a perfectionist. So he would tell you you really loved what you did, but you got a better one in there. And you just blew this solo, and you're like, yeah, you're ready to drop the mic and, put your hands in the air. And he's like, yeah, Jamie, I think there's a better one. And then you nail another one. And then he's like, well, I like the second part of that one better than the first one. And then by solo number 6, you're starting to get a little frustrated now, right? Because now you're starting to not feel it anymore, because now you're just feeling pressure. And David's just, kind of eating popcorn, watching the show. And then you get done with the 7th one, and he goes, yep, I really like the second one. And you're like, man, you son of a gun. So, but he that's his job. He wants to get the best out of you. And then he keeps you going to see if some sort of magical thing is going to happen. And so maybe he'll punch in the second half of the solo because it's better than, what I'm saying? So, it was a lot of pressure, a little intimidating, even though we were friends and we'd, been working together for quite some time on pre-production. But he just had really good ideas. Like, he was very cool about suggesting things. He never approached it from, a position of authority or ego or anything like that. It was just, in a very cool way, would maybe suggest, something, and then, it opens up your mind to think, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll do this. And it was cool. It was really, and to this day, I'm looking forward to working with Dave on something I got going on. So it winds up being good in the end, even though in the moment you're like, dang it, this guy's really good player, and he's like trying to play in front of him.
Yeah. Was David actually into production at that point, or was that like the first thing he did production wise with you guys?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think he had done some other things, but I think this was the big thing, okay. the first big thing.
Was he out of Bloodgood at that point, or he was still in the band?
Yes, he was out of the band at that point.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So now we move to the third record, which, as being a fan of the band from day one, I had always wondered about the upheaval and not only the lineup but the direction.
Mhm.
You're out, Stephen Patrick's out, Cutting is back in the band,
Right.
and it's flannel shirts and combat boots at this point.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I had left, which was the hardest thing I had probably done. Um, I was in that band at 19 years old, and Andy and I, pounding the pavement, passing out flyers, all the misery and work to get it to where we got it. After that second tour, financially, it's very hard, and you're working construction or whatever you have to do in between touring and recording. And after that second album, kind of seeing the turn and where music was going, and I had an opportunity for a career. I worked for Union Pacific Railroad here in Southern California, and I decided that I was going to take a break from that for a while and pursue a career, which I'm 30 years in now, and I'm retiring in 2 years. So,
Smart man.
yeah, no, thank you. And I have no regrets because I have a really great scrapbook and memory, and I get to do things like this and talk to you guys, and I'm still playing music, and music is still a big part of my life. So I lost nothing really. When I left, it was very hard. I actually didn't touch my guitar for probably 10 years, and that was such a big piece of me. I just had to step back, and it was very difficult. And it was hard on Andy too, because he was 16, I was 19, I think, when we started the band, and it was very difficult. So they bounced back, and Michael came back, and they went in and worked on Promise Man, and I like that record. I mean, I don't like the whole record, honestly, and I made it very, I'm very transparent. Andy knows, Michael knows, but I think there's some really good songs on there, and I think trying for a band to try to stay relevant is super important. I mean, unless you're AC/DC and you can just always sound like AC/DC, right? And people will love you and buy your records because you're AC/DC. But trying to stay relevant, and it's very difficult to do, and I think they did a good job at Promise Man, because I think for that time frame, it is a relevant album. And, as a songwriter, you can get stuck in a rut with how you write, but I've listened to interviews with some really good songwriters, and their secret is they listen to music of the day, right? They get into bands that are relevant in this time, and they get influenced, and that's how you write and stay relevant. And I think that's what they did for Promise Man. So good job on that one. I think they won a Dove Award for that album as well.
They did. They actually got a lot of exposure on that. Back in the day, I used to have a satellite dish, and I used to pull in this Christian station. I forget the guy who had this show. It was sponsored by the Heaven's Metal magazine. And they really pumped this album up a lot. It got a lot of advertisement. It got a lot of exposure. And I actually liked it. I bought it when it came out. And I kind of have the same feelings you do. There were some songs that I really liked a lot. I thought there were, a couple that I didn't particularly like. But overall, I thought it was, for what it was, I thought it was a good record.
Yeah, I agree.
So now we move on to a period of time when there was some type of a, albeit I guess kind of short, reformation of the band. If you could tell us about that.
Yeah. So 2005, there was a promoter that wanted to get us together to do some shows, and the first show was in Anaheim, California. So, funny story. I obviously kept some of my guitars, but I had a lot of stage gear that I no longer needed, for all those years. And I had a storage unit full of stacks of amps and cabinets, and my rack mount with my amps in it and my gear and all this stuff that I was never planning on using again. So here comes this reunion show. So I got to go out and start buying gear. So I had my guitars, but other than a little practice amp, I didn't have anything I'd use on stage. So I got, bought another Marshall. I got a Marshall half stack, started buying pedals, and started practicing my butt off. And it's really funny because when you play songs 4 billion times live and in rehearsals 5 nights a week, it's amazing after a period of time where you listen to it and go, what did I do there? So there was some of that for a while. And then I walk into the first rehearsal, and it was very flattering because Mike Cutting says, "Man, you haven't missed a beat." And I said, "Well, don't realize what it took to get back here."
That's because he missed 2 beats while you missed 1.
Right? He's like, "Man, you sound like you did before." And I'm like, "Well, it took a minute to get back, but I'm here." So Steven had been singing country music previously up until this point. So Steven showed up, and we started rehearsals, and it was I don't even know how to frame it. I think he struggled a little bit, and we went in and did that first show, and he decided he didn't want to do that, and we got another singer to finish the other 3 shows. We played a festival in Wilmar, Minnesota, and a couple other shows locally, and one out in the valley in Los Angeles, Paladinos, and we did one in, I want to say, down in Lake Elsinore area. And then that was it. There wasn't any talk of doing another record. I think we kind of kicked it around a little bit at that time, but we were kind of spread all over the map. I think Michael was living in Florida, and Andy was in Florida or Arizona. I was out here. So, it was just kind of difficult to, bring that back, full time.
So before I wanted to, we're kind of wrapping things up here because there wasn't really any activity for the band, since then, right? But one of the things I did want to ask you about was if we could go way back to the first album, and I wanted to talk about the song "See No Evil." This right now, for people that don't know, it's a song that's, I guess, it's about something that's a hot button issue in this current day and age, of course.
Yes.
I mean, without kind of getting into whole moral political thing. The topic of the song is about abortion. But was this something that you guys either got like some controversy generated at the time or even years after because of that song?
Not years after, but we're in pre-production. And as I said, I wrote the main hook, for that song, and I had a vision for that song. And Steve, while we were working all day, would go out in the fields in Fresno on the ranch we were on and write lyrics and try to work up some melody ideas. He had a little cassette player, and he would record some of the ideas. He'd go out and try to work up lyrics and melody. So he comes back with the lyrics for "See No Evil." I lost my mind. I'm like, no. And so it was one of those moments, and there's several, where it was a Jamie intervention where I get the circle around me and I'm in the chair and people are telling me why it's a good idea. When you really look at that song, because I'm going to say this, as a young man, we either knew somebody that had an abortion or, I just think it's such a controversial issue, even then, that I didn't think it was a good idea. I really didn't. But the way the song was written was not coming from a place of condemnation.
Right.
And when it was explained to me as Steve was reading the lyrics, it was from an unborn child's point of view. So it puts a whole other dynamic and level on the issue. It's not saying it's right or wrong, but hey, this is what if an unborn child could speak out.
Right.
And the video is exactly about that. So the kid in the video, as you see walking around, he's seeing kids playing in the park, and he's looking at a book, a children's book, and throws it down on the ground and walks away. And at the end of the video, he kind of fades away as he's walking off, and he's seeing the world he never got to see. Right? He never had an opportunity to be part of.
Yeah.
And I think it was pretty powerful, but yes, it was very controversial. In fact, our video aired on MTV, and I heard it got pulled because of that. I don't know if that's true, but all of a sudden it was, being aired at like 2 a.m, and then it eventually got pulled. So was it a good idea? Was it a bad idea? I can't say, but like I said earlier, I think things happen for a reason, and I think that song was written that way because it was supposed to.
No, I mean, it's a very, very, like you mentioned, a very powerful, and it's very thought-provoking, and just like you say, from the way it was written, from the point of view.
Yes. And Steve had a knack for that. Steve was a very good lyricist, even like the song "Lies" and, "See No Evil," and he had a way. Even like "Last Train," using the whole, analogy of, do you have your ticket? Are you going to be on the train?
Yeah.
And it's not an overt statement, but it's a story, and it kind of paints a picture, and you get to think about what it's talking about.
Right.
It makes you kind of think. So, and that's kind of what See No Evil do. And yeah, I mean, I think it is what it was supposed to be, even though I was very against it when I first heard what it was about. And
Yeah.
like I said, I lost my mind. I'm like, are you guys crazy?
Yeah.
And when you write the music and the guitar parts, and you have an idea, because it's a rockin' kind of hooky song. It's got a cool rhythmic drive to it, and then you're gonna kill it with that. You're kidding me, right?
Yeah.
And then I was completely wrong, clearly, because it turned out the way it was supposed to turn out. And
it's a great song. Yeah, I mean, the album wouldn't have been complete without that song. I mean, if you changed the lyrics around, I guess, and left the music, it might have been. But it was, I thought, one of the standout tracks on the album.
I appreciate that.
So let's move up to the current day, 2022. Are you doing anything musically that you care to talk about or share?
Yeah. So, I get asked a lot why, am I in a band, and I've got friends that are playing like, just cover tunes and stuff. And it's really a struggle for me, because when you go see some of these bands and everybody's looking at their iPhones or their phones, and these guys are up there trying to put their heart out, and nobody really cares because your background music at a bar, it's like, that's not what I wanted to do. But yeah, I'm doing a premiere project, a showcase project with a couple cats that, and it hasn't been released yet, so I don't want to give too much, but I'm currently doing some home recording. I've got a couple of songs in the can, and I can say that we're going to be working with David Zaffiro. It's not a Christian band. In fact, we're hammering out the final pieces of figuring out the name of the band, and then we'll start a Kickstarter fund to get it out on social media to help fund the project. But we were supposed to be in Nashville last month, the 19th, for a couple weeks to start pre-production and hammer out like 4 songs. And then, of course, you guys heard about Michael Bloodgood passing away. So there was some issues with our singer that's in Argentina that couldn't make it, and that was the driving force by postponing it. And then, Michael passed away, and so it wasn't supposed to happen at that time. So now it's giving us some time to really kind of fine tune the ideas. Andy's got one song already that he's previously recorded. We're going to work through. We're talking. David was thinking about maybe doing one of his songs, The Other Side, and redoing it, kind of updating that song, and we're kicking that idea around. So, yeah, to answer your question, yes. And I'm hoping we get something out. We wanted to get something out before the end of the year, and I don't think that's going to happen at this point. But next year, I'm pretty sure we'll have something available, whether it's an EP or a full-length album. If the Kickstarter fund does what we hope it will, then it'll give us enough resources to record an entire album. Looking forward to it.
Will it be in the melodic hard rock vein?
Okay, so great question. And people ask me, so what's it going to be? And it's hard to explain. So
Don't break my heart.
No. So I'm gonna give you a little teaser, right? So Andy's very much into Pink Floyd, and I think I just gave something away. So that's funny. So the prog rock thing, and the singer is, he does some Genesis cover stuff in Argentina, and he's very well known down there. So it's going to have some of that cool ethereal vibe, but it's going to be rocking as well. And so the one piece that I've already written and sent to David to kind of put you at ease a little bit, David said, okay, that's Jamie all over it. So if you like See No Evil, Stranger type stuff, it's hard to not write just to writing. And so it's going to have some guitars in that vein. So if you like that kind of stuff, what I've already written guitar wise, and it's got a pretty good, cool breakdown in the middle of it. So we want to do something that's rocking, has some depth, some maturity, but I do not want to, and I already talked, and I already said it. So Andy and I have talked, and I told Andy, I said, I do not want to do anything that's going to be putting people to sleep. And Andy, we agree, it's not coming out unless it's really good. And we have our standards set pretty high. So it's going to be good. It won't be Holy Soldier, obviously, but it's going to be. We won't let it out unless it's really good.
Well, I love 70s Pink Floyd, so that doesn't.
Well, there you go. There you go. So throw in See No Evil and Pink Floyd, and there you go. That's what it's
throw in Animals and See No Evil. It's my favorite album by Pink Floyd. I saw them on that tour.
Yeah, that's a good album.
Well, looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is there anywhere that people can keep updated on the progress of it?
Yeah, actually, well, Andy Robbins page, I don't have an artist page yet, and I get a lot of requests on Facebook, and it's my personal page, so I have to build an artist page, and then, I'll put it out on that. Andy's going to put it out on his page on Facebook, and then the Holy Soldier page, believe it or not, but it'll be on that as well. So we'll make sure it's on every format we can get it out when we get the news out.
Okay, great. So, Tom, anything else that you...
No, I'm good. We're going to wrap up, but after we do the wrap up, stay on the phone. I want to talk to you for 3 minutes off the I want to tell you a funny story.
Well, everybody, hey, Jamie, we appreciate you bringing us down memory lane with Holy Soldier, and right up to today with everything that's going on with you. We'll definitely keep an eye out for the new project, and thanks for joining us here on the Jersey Guys podcast tonight.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
All right, great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Stranger!
So, hey, everybody, this is Mark from the Jersey Guys podcast, and we just talked with Jamie Cramer from Holy Soldier. How do you think that one went, Tom?
I think it went really good. He was a terrific guest. one of my more favorite people to talk to since we've been doing this. It was a real pleasure. This was a band that I got into from the inception. Was always very much into these first two albums, Steve and Patrick's solo album, and I even kind of liked the grunge album that they did that Jamie actually was not part of. But this was another band that I could cross off the list that I wanted to get a key member on for a while and discuss everything about them. And I think we covered just about everything. So yes, I was very, very happy with it.
Yeah, no, I thought he was a great guy, good person to talk to. A couple cool little stories there, and I wasn't the biggest Holy Soldier fan, back in the day. Just wasn't super aware of the band, but knowing them now and having the albums like I do and enjoying them. So yeah, it was good to talk to him and like I said, an original member, and get a little bit of that background from the band from their early days through the album. So yeah, I thought it was a good conversation.
Yes, excellent.
So, all right, we got another episode coming to you guys soon, so look out for that, and we hope you guys enjoyed this one.